welcome to episode 20 of Train Station at 8. We've saved you a seat. This episode is going to be about the SNES, also referred to by some as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, but not very many.
Some people call it the SNES too, don't leave them out.
That's a good point, but I don't like to associate with those people, Stephen.
I'm bad news for you.
Uh-oh. Oh, sure, we're going to lose all our guests. All right, guys. I am your host, Brian Kelly. This is a video game music podcast focused on conversation and discussion. And joining me for this today is my brother, Stephen Kelly. Hi, Stephen. How you doing?
Hello, my brother, Brian Kelly. I'm doing great today.
Awesome. And repeat guests from episode 5, so very early guests, Joe and Christina Walker. Hello, guys. How you doing?
Hello.
Hello. We are good.
Good. You can speak for both of you? You have that permission?
I think so. I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's in the marriage contract.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, you got all this sorted out beforehand. That's great. So, Joe, you run a YouTube show about retro games.
I do. My show is called The Backlog, and it's all about obscure and forgotten retro games that are still cheap and easy to find.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm actually now featured on RetrowareTV.com, so that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see you guys a lot around the Twitter, so that's always a lot of fun. And I'm sure you review plenty of SNES games.
Yes, I do. It's a great system, so I always love going back and introducing people to games that they might have walked by at the thrift store many times.
Right. Yeah. I wish I went to thrift stores that had video games, but I typically don't. They aren't really around here. The only retro game store locally is 30 minutes down a highway towards downtown, which is a bummer.
I feel like there have got to be more that we just don't know about. Just Houston is so
scattered,
caved in around itself that you can't really find anything unless you're really looking hard for it.
Exactly.
But we talked about the SNES a good deal last time you guys were on the show. I think.
Well, our episode was on all retro gaming consoles.
Yeah. But I feel like the SNES was one we kept going back to. And we keep referencing it in other episodes, so I'm kind of happy that we can give it a full treatment this time.
Exactly. This is actually going to be our first episode about a specific console, I believe.
You're right. Why did we not make the first one about the Genesis?
Okay, hello. Welcome to episode 20 about the Genesis. All right. So let's jump in here. We have an 8-question format here on Train Station at 8. So let's go on to question number 1. What have you been listening to? Any type of music, video game or otherwise. Joe. Go ahead.
I've actually been listening to a lot of Dragon Ball music.
Oh, right. You're working on that episode, right?
Yeah, the next episode of my show is about... I don't know why I decided to do 6 games in one episode.
I just see all these tweets about you working like crazy.
Yeah, it's consuming me, but it's fun. Mm-hmm. So I've been listening to... when I've been at work, I'm listening to a lot of Dragon Ball music to keep myself in the mood. But
cool.
The game soundtracks I've been going back to a lot is Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh, yeah.
That's been going on repeat. Hitoshi Sakamoto is my favorite game composer, so I love that soundtrack a lot.
I've heard that name very recently. What other stuff did he do?
He's done all the Ivalice games for Squaresoft, so Vagrant Story, Final Fantasy XII, the other Final Fantasy Tactics games.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a really distinctive style that I like a lot.
Awesome.
That's very cool. I've never actually played Final Fantasy Tactics, which I guess isn't surprising since there are many, many Final Fantasy games I haven't played. But how would you describe the general vibe of that music? Is it more battle focused or militaristic than normal Final Fantasies, or what?
I would say it's more medieval and Celtic, kind of.
Yeah, it's got a lot of strings. It's more about setting the tone and kind of putting you in that frame of mind rather than, here's a really intense battle theme. It's more
strategic thinking.
Yeah, more strategical thinking, and you're in this medieval world rather than just here's a bunch of guitars for your battle theme.
Yeah, summons and crazy stuff happening all over.
Yeah, some of my favorite RPG soundtracks come from Fire Emblem games, which are very similar genre to Final Fantasy Tactics. So I'd be curious how they compare.
Well, that's kind of, I feel like that's a weird blind spot for us because we played Tactics Ogre a while ago.
Right.
And we've gone through Fire Emblem, and even getting out of the fantasy genre kind of with Advance Wars, but totally skip Tactics.
Yeah.
One of those things I want to go back to.
It's worth it. It holds up. It's still really, really, really good.
Nifty.
Great. So is that about all you've been listening to? Dragon Ball?
Yeah, that's it. I tend to just kind of latch onto a couple things at a time and, just over and over. So that's all I've been doing.
Very cool. What about you, Christina?
I've mostly been listening to Sailor Moon music, actually, because the new anime series just started a couple weeks back, and the old series has been running on Hulu, and I'm getting pretty hyped up about the Blu-ray release that's coming up soon. So I've been listening to a lot of the old vocal songs from the original series.
Is that like J-pop or like what kind of genre?
Yeah, it's mostly J-pop style.
Cool.
Yeah.
I always enjoy when I like get into a JRPG and it just starts out with some crazy J-pop song that's absolutely unlike the rest of the game entirely.
Yeah.
I always get really amped. I enjoy that. That's neat.
I only know one song from Sailor Moon.
Really?
And it's the new series theme song.
Oh, that single actually just came out today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The full version out. It's real good.
I know nothing about the series, but I only heard the song once, and I was like singing it back to myself through the entire rest of the day. I don't know what it was about it.
It's really catchy, yeah.
It's a really good song.
It really is, yeah.
It
was, so that's Sailor Moon history with Steven.
So I guess we know what you've been listening to recently, Steven.
Well, I didn't say I've been looping it since, but...
Okay.
Well, anything else? I don't want to cut off Christina.
Oh, no. I mean, aside from Sailor Moon, I'm just addicted to Persona music.
Oh, like 3 or 4?
3 and 4 I've been listening to. A Best Of album just came out recently, so I've kind of had that on repeat.
I love Persona 3's soundtrack.
It's really great. I'm still playing through Portable. I think I'm like a little more than halfway.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, we kind of got distracted, I guess.
Well, we
really
have
enjoying
a terrible track record of finishing JRPGs.
The worst. I mean, it was years before we even finished one. Somehow we made it to the end of Tales of Vesperia. Still proud of us for that one.
Yeah.
But I actually recently ordered a physical copy of the Persona 3 soundtrack.
Oh, nice.
With a bunch of other game soundtracks from someone who was selling it on... it was actually through Video Game Music Database. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah, and I'm just so excited for that to get here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the one I'm really excited that you got in all of that was the Metroid Prime collection.
Ooh.
Oh, man.
Very cool.
Well, it's Metroid Prime plus Fusion.
Oh,
that was like a
nice.
specific collection that came out a while ago.
That's awesome.
And I actually got a really good deal on it, and I'm pretty excited.
Great.
So I'm sure I'll be talking about all those soundtracks soon.
So what I've been listening to lately is Steven's screams of glee as he's been there is looking up all these. So
I got in over my head. I went in there for Metroid and came out with 7 soundtracks. So
yep.
But as for what I've been listening to recently, I've been listening to the Chameleon Twist soundtrack.
Yeah,
nice.
That game's got great music.
It does.
It caught both of us off guard with that super jazzy, like 6-minute long Antland theme song.
Yeah.
I was totally surprised when it just started jumping into like a keyboard solo. I'm like, they do know this is just like a little N64 platformer, right? They don't have to do this.
Yeah, it's like sad that the vast, vast majority of our species will never hear the Antland theme.
Well, I did an episode on my show about that game, so I'm doing my part to spread the word.
Yeah, exactly.
We're doing our part together.
I actually remember seeing that show. Brian actually bought that game for my birthday, which was a few days ago.
Among others, I'm not a terrible brother.
Among many. And I'm like, oh, did you hear about this from the backlog? And he's like, no, was this on the backlog? That's a weird coincidence. I didn't think he'd discover that on his own.
I didn't think it was good enough when I looked it up to be on the backlog, because it just seemed so obscure, and like I had no idea if it was actually like people enjoyed it or not when I picked it up. I just liked how it looked and sounded. So what do you think about it?
It's my sister's favorite game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how I heard about it, is they had a copy and I played it. I was like, this is really good. I want to do an episode on this.
Wow, this goes deep. So I have Christina's sister to thank for this.
the actual game really went up and downhill for both of us. It got
level.
kind of frustrating.
Kid level.
Yeah,
Good gosh.
that got frustrating.
Oh,
but
the sweet one?
Yeah.
That's the hardest one in the game,
It
yeah.
was so hard. Oh, my
Yeah.
gosh.
I went downstairs and watched some Avatar because I couldn't deal with it anymore. That Brian forged through. But I think I've had enough of hearing for the time being.
Yeah.
But that was a fun, silly game.
Cool.
What else have I been listening to? I feel like it's been more playing games than listening. But Green Hill Sessions came out on Overclocked Records, which is the official, basically music label of OC Remix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very fun arrangement of the Sonic 1 soundtrack.
Oh, nice.
By Jive Master. I hope I'm getting that right. I think it's Jive Master who did that. And I mean, I'll be the first to say that, to be honest, I'm really tired of people covering Sonic 1.
Steven? I'm pretty sure not the first to say that.
Well, I'll be in the first line of this. I won't be the people caught snaking outside down the sidewalk.
Sure.
I love the Sonic... Yeah, no, never.
All right.
I do like the Sonic 1 soundtrack a lot. Mm-hmm. But I actually feel like Sonic 2, 3, and Knuckles, and some of the later soundtracks are better. And so I'm kind of sad when people just go back to Green Hill or Spring Yard Zone over and over again and never do anything else.
Well, it's the Mega Man 2 Sonic games.
It kind of is. You're right. But that said, it is a very creative and fun to listen to album, so I have no qualms with the actual quality of the music.
Awesome.
So that's been very fun. And really the only other thing is, of course, I'm going back to Sonic Generations, which is just a constant, which I love because it remixes all of the music from the Sonic series. Yeah. So good on that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
We still need to decide if we're going to buy that autographed copy or not.
Wait, what do you mean decide?
Did we buy that autographed copy?
You said yes.
Oh wow. Okay. All right then. We still need to wait for that to arrive in the mail.
Yeah, one of the many things I can't wait to arrive in the mail. All right. So Brian, what have you been up to?
Oh man, well I've been listening to Chameleon Twist, of course. Yep. I've also been listening to a ton of different video game music on the Mercado Brothers soundtrack or podcast. Our fellow video game music podcasters. I've just been going through their backlog, no pun intended, recently. Yeah. and listening to all their old episodes, and they're fantastic.
That's great.
Fire Emblem, an episode where they just bring their favorite stuff and play it. An episode where their listeners submit stuff. It's been really neat. They give a lot of good insight that most people don't on, not just about the game and the era and what it sounds like emotionally, but they understand the music theory behind what they're listening to, and it's really interesting to hear them talk about that sort of thing. Partially because the other thing I've been listening to a lot lately is a bunch of old just games from the past 20 years or 15 years of our gaming history, because I put together that thing for your birthday where I recorded the 15 covers of different video game music, one from each console that we bought, and mixed them all together into a medley. So I've been listening to a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
The train station audience does not know about this yet.
Right, you're right. We talked about it in Disembodied Voices, I think.
Right. And so for our birthdays every year, Brian and I try to one-up each other, essentially making creative projects. This time, Brian had spent a month secretly crafting, like you just said, a medley of the 15 consoles that we've owned over the last 15 years. Right. And one game, one song per console, all put into one big 15-minute track.
Well, it's been difficult because to record, I have my guitar, drum machine, and a Yamaha keyboard. I don't have a fancy setup yet, so it took a lot of interesting doings to make enough variety and to also capture the sound of all these games we love so much.
Well, that's what caught me off guard, because you have not done music production on any scale near this at all.
It was a way to push myself forward in music production for sure.
Right, and we'll be putting it up somewhere, probably on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I've gotten it uploaded to YouTube, so I can find it.
It was just... Wait, did we talk about Lost Vikings with you guys, how the music was all slow at the beginning? can't remember if that was the podcast you were on. Well, back when we played The Lost Vikings for the first time on the PC, our sound card wouldn't play it right, so the entire theme song was played like slowed down to like
yes,
half
I think
speed.
that was with us. I think I
that
remember
story
that
does sound familiar.
And it amazingly, like the whole medley Brian created started off with a rendition of that song at that speed. And so
fantastic.
I was just already loving it from the very beginning. Of course, I'm biased. It's specifically geared towards
well,
inside
it
jokes
was
and
our
everything.
most memorable games from each console. Yeah, like I did Sonic Adventure 2, Nights into Dreams, lots of different stuff. Have you guys ever heard the basement theme from Resident Evil DualShock Edition on the PlayStation?
No, I don't think so.
Is that the director's cut version of the game?
Yes.
I had that when I was younger. I can't remember what the song was now, but
all right,
I've heard it at some point in my life.
I'll send it to you after the show, and you need to listen to, and Steve, you need to link it in the show notes, because it is the worst piece of video game music ever composed.
Is it really?
Oh, you have to hear it. I won't go into how, but that's what I did for the PlayStation, and it was fun.
Whatever you're imagining in your heads right now, it's worse than that.
Yeah, I definitely need to see it after.
I don't know. I know some pretty bad video game music, so...
Shall we get into Doom on the 3DO, was it?
Oh, no.
Oh, God. 32X.
32X, that was it.
I don't want to talk about this again.
We need to have, like, a rap battle, but instead of rap, we just put horrible video game music forward.
That'll be fun. But yeah, just listening to a lot of stuff in prep for that, deciding what I was going to do and that sort of thing.
Great.
And yeah, that's most of what I've been listening to, so we can get into the meat of our topic here. The SNES. I hate myself now because I just said that. Okay, what is your history with the SNES? Steven.
Oh, me? Well, I didn't own many video games growing up.
We don't need your impoverished childhood. We just...
In the 90s, during the Great Depression, we didn't own very many video games because our parents were staunchly against them. They thought every video game was Mortal Kombat. And so I had to play games at friends' houses for the most part. And those friends tended to own the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So I had a very traditional upbringing when it comes to that era. Mario Kart, Donkey Kong Country, Mario World, Power Rangers, all of the classics.
Yes, indeed.
And so I really didn't have much of an appreciation for music back then at all. So Donkey Kong could have probably been playing Resident Evil Director's Cut, and I might have not noticed. But that was my introduction to the SNES, and I played it for many happy hours.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it was really late until we actually bought one. Last year for your birthday, I got you a SNES.
Yep,
so
it's been that long.
We worked with an SC Twin for a while, but it went out. And we also wanted the actual thing after that. So, yeah. What about you, Joe?
I was actually a Sega kid growing up.
Cool.
My best friend at the time had a Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
So when my parents decided that they were going to get me a new console, because we had just the NES, I decided I was going to get a Sega Genesis so we could each have one, and then we kind of stopped being friends. But I did have some access to the Super Nintendo. I didn't get my own until after I had played Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation. And I was like, I want to play Chrono Trigger. So I didn't get my own Super Nintendo until probably about, I don't know, 1999, 2000.
Okay.
All right.
I've been a fan since then.
All right. And what about you, Christina?
I got my SNES for Christmas, the year it came out, actually.
Nice.
I was really big into video games since my dad got an NES when I was like 2, so.
Cool.
And I remember with it, I got, Turtles in Time and, Mickey's Magical Quest.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, 2 really, really great games. So it started the system off really well for me. And yeah, it's my favorite system. I still play it a lot. Yeah, it's my favorite. I kind of occasionally I'll say the N64 is my favorite, but I think no, the SNES is really the favorite.
I think the reason I would say the N64 is my favorite is because that was my first video game console I owned.
Gotcha.
So it's sort of entrenched in my mind, but I'm not going to argue that the SNES probably has a better library if you're going to be all objective about it.
Remember, Chameleon Twist is on the Nintendo 64.
Ooh, that's a good point, Brian.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like 3 of my favorite games are on N64, but then like...
What are those?
Oh, the N64 favorites?
Yeah.
Banjo-Kazooie, Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, and Diddy Kong Racing.
All right. I've wanted to play that Mystical Ninja game. It's
so great.
Yeah, it looks really neat. Is that the side-scroller or the 3D platformer?
That's the 3D platformer.
Okay, yeah, it was kind of expensive. It's like around $35 or something on Amazon.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, but I did want to try it, for sure.
It's really good. It's worth it.
Neat.
But yeah, the N64 has like 3 of my favorite games, but the SNES has like a bajillion that I love. So.
Yep.
Yeah, especially if you like JRPGs and platformers. Then
exactly.
It's a good console. All right then. So on that note, question number 3: what is your personal standout soundtrack from the SNES?
The problematic part of this question is that it is not a plural. You want me to pick one soundtrack
specifically? Because I know when I give you a plural, Stephen, you take that really far.
That's super true.
You're the guy who went in to buy one soundtrack and bought 7. So.
Well, I have my answer, but I'm not. I feel like I do a lot of the talking around here, so I'm gonna let someone else go first.
All right. Is your answer Donkey Kong Country?
Yes.
All right. So that's us. Joe.
My standout is Earthbound. And the answer actually came right to me, but then I thought about it more, and I think I consider it the standout because I think that soundtrack can only exist on the Super Nintendo hardware. Like,
really?
You know, everybody likes, you know, Final Fantasy soundtracks and everything, and I think you can do those like in an orchestra, and it's the same song, but you couldn't do that with Earthbound's music. I think the Earthbound soundtrack is great because it exists solely in the Super Nintendo hardware.
That's a really good point. It's like, it's one of those rare soundtracks that isn't trying to be something else. It isn't smashing samples onto the SNES out of necessity. It's actually using that hardware to be itself.
Right. It's such a weird game, so they made such a weird soundtrack, and I don't know, it's its own thing, and there's nothing else like it.
Yeah, that's really an interesting answer. I never really considered that, partially because I still haven't played Earthbound.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, but now that it's, you know,
console now.
Exactly, now that it's on
we
virtual
own it now.
console.
Oh,
it was a Club Nintendo reward, so we own it.
Perfect.
Excellent.
I really want to.
Gotta get on that.
And the amazing thing is, because the references and stuff to it are so weird, I still know nothing about it. So, like, it's not like I've been spoiled. I don't know Eris dies or whatever. I don't know the spoilers for Earthbound, so I'm really curious to try it.
I hear there are yo-yos.
I hear there are yo-yos, and I do know there are yo-yos and baseball bats and little kids with psychic powers. So, hey. What about you, Christina?
This is really a hard question for me, because Earthbound is my favorite game of all time. But Joe already said that, so I have to pick something else. So I would probably go with Chrono Trigger.
A good choice.
Yeah, I don't even know how to explain how special that game was to me at the time. I think I played it before Earthbound, actually. I think it was one of my first couple of RPGs I ever rented at the store. But that soundtrack, it has such a range of emotion in it, and the composer, Mitsuda, he's wonderful.
I haven't played very much Chrono Trigger. It's
really?
JRPGs in general, big blank spot for Brian and I.
Right. Well, one very difficult part is we didn't grow up playing them. So going back to them requires so much time that it's very difficult for us to like catch up on 10 Final Fantasy games.
Sure, they take a while.
And there are just so many. But Steven, what were you saying?
I was going to say I tend to know a number of the songs just because, you know, we played, I don't know, the first 3 hours of it.
Right. And there are a lot of remixes.
Right. But I never really got it until I heard the video game's live rendition. And then I'm like, oh, for some reason in this context, these melodies are making more sense to me. I'm really getting why people love this so much.
Yeah.
And you're right, Christina. It's just like quivering with emotion. It really is something special.
That's really interesting, actually, that not having experienced all the places that game takes you, you can just hear the music and still get that out of it.
Right.
And I'm sure, I don't know the context, that's very true, but sometimes you can just tell with songs. Like, you can just something...
I mean, that's true for me with the Nier soundtrack as well, a more recent example. I've never played that game, but the soundtrack is still phenomenal, and you can tell, like, you can still get so much emotion from the music even without knowing the context of the emotion in the story.
Exactly, and I think that's a mark of a really good score.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very much so. Very much so.
I would be really curious what the Earthbound soundtrack would tell someone without having experienced Earthbound.
From the limited amount I've heard, I still couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Oh, man. And I just think it's so weird that there's nothing Earthbound in Smash Bros. Yet.
Have they not announced anything?
We saw Mr. Saturn in a screenshot or two.
Okay, cool. There.
So we know there's going to be some Earthbound.
That's good. Mr. Saturn is a classic item, you know. Competitive players are mad about Mr. Saturn, so. All right, then. Did we go through all this, Steven? Oh, right. No, Steven, since I chose Donkey Kong Country, you can choose one of your many other standout soundtracks.
Okay. If I can't go with Donkey Kong Country, I think I would probably go with Super Mario World.
Yeah, it's a good choice.
And it's interesting. I feel like compared to some of the later games on the SNES, it's actually fairly simple.
Well, all the Super Mario World is really rudimentary when you get down to it. It's like simplicity.
Oh, yeah. But you can't really deny those, the melodies that game invented. And as we've talked to Will and Carl Brueggemann, the Mercado Bros, in fact, quite a bit. There's a lot of ragtime in there. There's sometimes, especially, the standout song I really wanted to talk about was the Castle song.
Right.
That's one of those songs that, if you're not listening, it's just background castle music. But the second you stop and pay attention, it's like this incredible dramatic orchestra that you would not think should belong in a Mario game. It like has this ostentatious...
Something you pointed out that that I found interesting is it takes like a minute and a half to get past the intro into like the main melody, which for SNES soundtrack is crazy. Like, that is one long...
It is. It really is. And it kind of has this air of classical culture.
And it builds up tension really well, which is what those castles should be doing.
It's the same with the ghost houses, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
Just the instrumentation that Koji Kondo used for that, it just kind of gets under your skin.
Yeah, that's a good pick for sure.
I think the reason I'm putting it on here is because for many years I just loved it because of the tunes that were whistleable. But later on I realized that these are not just whistleable, but they're actually brilliantly constructed, and they're just fun to analyze.
It's always great when you have those great childhood memories, and instead of going back and saying, oh, these aren't as good as I remember, you go back and say, oh, wait, this is why I liked it. Because there was a depth here that I didn't even get when I was a kid. And that's the best of games and the best of movies and any real entertainment you had from when you were a kid. And Mario World definitely stands that test.
But it's still not as good as Donkey Kong Country.
Exactly, which is my pick. Donkey Kong Country stands that test threefold. I think Donkey Kong Country is one that maybe even as a kid you wouldn't even fully appreciate the melodies until you go back to them later. And my gosh, is that soundtrack wonderful. And just, I find it uses the Super Nintendo's whole soundscape very well. So...
And if you'd like to hear us go really, really in-depth on that, you can listen to the episode where we spend an hour and a half talking about one song from Donkey Kong Country.
Oh, Lord. Is it the water song?
Oh, no, but that's a good guess.
We consider that. It's the
Island
first
Swing
song, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
The classic.
Jungle Japes.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, man, that's a good song.
That is a good song. So, I like Donkey Kong Country 2's soundtrack better, but...
Interesting factoid about that first song. You know how it has, like, the first part, and then it goes into the doo-doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo-doo, and then after that it kind of drops down to a quiet part. it was originally 3 separate songs that David Wise created as a demo reel for Rare, and then he just put them all together and turned it into the first level.
Didn't he release those as unreleased tracks at one point on his blog or something?
He totally might have, yeah.
I feel like I saw something about that somewhere years ago.
I would believe it. I can't confirm it now, but that doesn't sound too fantastical. All right. Well, moving on here then to question number 4. What are some of the Super Nintendo's greatest musical strengths and weaknesses? Christina, you got any?
I mean, I think its biggest strength is its ability to get the orchestral instrumentation across, even though it has its technical limits.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Much more than something like the Genesis could do.
Exactly, which I think is why I'm more favorable towards the SNES than the Genesis.
That makes sense. I mean, for like RPGs, that's why I think RPGs thrive so much musically.
Exactly.
Genesis RPGs always sound like a little bit too action-packed or a little bit off. It did better for stuff like Phantasy Star, which were like these, sci-fi RPGs.
Right. But for like sweeping epic songs, I think
exactly
can't beat the SNES.
The Genesis had a very hard time sounding pretty.
True.
At any moment. The SNES kind of it could mimic flutes, and it could use brass. See, well, maybe a little too much.
That's actually an interesting reason. One reason I might prefer the Genesis myself is because I'd never grown up with the Super Nintendo. I'd already heard much better orchestral pieces in video game music in terms of technically getting across orchestras. I had the N64 and the GameCube to the point where I'd had live orchestral games like Shadow of the Colossus before I really went back that much.
Gotcha.
Well, the Genesis has like this really punchy original sound to it that's just fun to listen to and isn't really trying to be something else that hard, which makes it kind of timeless in a certain way to me.
I think the thing you have to give credit to the SNES for, though, is it's like the ditto of classic video game
Pokemon analogy.
In the sense that, especially with its samples, especially if you have a master like David Wise using samples, you can get just about anything on there.
Yeah.
You can get bongos, you can get synth, you can get like organs, whatever you need.
I think versatility is its number one strength. It can do so many different things. I think that's absolutely a huge pro to it. I think just where I see the biggest con with it there is sometimes to me it sounds a little bit distant. Or a little bit hollow compared to...
A little flat. Sometimes it can sound flat if you're not using it well.
Yeah. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think that the Super Nintendo's main advantage is that it can simulate actual instruments. And it's like you said, that's why it does RPGs so well, because they need those big, sweeping sounds. Christina and I argue a lot about Super Nintendo versus Genesis.
Right.
And like the Genesis definitely had its strengths, and I think that it sounded great when it wasn't trying to mimic instruments.
Yep.
Because
exactly.
You put those two consoles together, and the Super Nintendo is just going to run circles around it. But no, it definitely did a wonderful job simulating real instruments and kind of making video game music sound like real music for the first time on consoles. So.
True.
That's a good point.
A big thing.
Does anyone else here feel, though, that in the hands of the inexperienced, the brass could just get out of hand?
Like the Super Nintendo?
Too easily, I feel like, on the SNES. Your trumpets and your horns kind of get this very flat and overly... Man, I'm not even sure the word. I don't want to say synthesized, because everything kind of is. It's very...
Well, horns are the hardest thing to do in any synthetic form.
So, and I just feel like the SNES...
do you have an example? I honestly can't remember.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to recall,
that uses horns. I mean, I remember Donkey Kong.
I totally did have an example. I wish I could remember it now.
I totally...
The Lord of the Rings actually kind of fell into that trap, I think.
Because everyone knows that soundtrack.
even to the extent I think A Link to the Past did a little bit. I think it could sometimes lean on that too hard.
Right. Interesting.
But I can't back this up very well. But I just tend to remember.
I'll listen out for it. I mean, I totally believe it, because horns are something that I can't. Very few synthetic horns sound right or sound good.
Yeah, they can sound jarring sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So that makes sense to me. All right, then. So moving on here to question number 5. How do you think nostalgia affects your opinion of SNES music, and do you know what you'd think of it without nostalgic context? So I have an interesting perspective on this because, as I mentioned, I don't have a ton of nostalgia for the SNES at large. I have nostalgia for like 2 or 3 games that we used to like play. You know how hotels had Super Nintendo set up? That's where I would get my Super Nintendo in, and it was like always Mario World pretty much every time. So like that music, absolutely, I don't know if I could see it without nostalgia.
Probably could have just bought a Super Nintendo for all the money we had our parents spend on renting Super Nintendo from La Quinta Inn.
I remember now the reason that we went so long without owning one, which is Donkey Kong Country and Super Mario World were on the Game Boy Advance.
Oh.
And we had a game.
And then we
player.
got used to the inferior music quality.
Exactly.
And forgot that it was that good.
Yeah. So I don't have a ton of nostalgia. Maybe that's part of the reason why I kind of have a less prestigious view of it than some people do. But like, what do you think, Joe?
I mean, for me, it's not necessarily nostalgia because I've never like stopped playing old consoles.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that's a good point.
I've never like packed them away, and to this day, like I'm still seeking out like new Super Nintendo games that I don't know about. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, for me, I don't think that the nostalgia really comes into play because to me, it's just good game music is good game music, no matter how old it is.
That's
I don't necessarily look at it as this isn't as good as what's happening today. It's, you know, these artists used different tools to, you know, make these great sounds.
Absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, I think the bigger problem I see more than people saying the Super Nintendo music isn't good because it's old is, you know, when you see all these people saying game music is trash now and used to be so good. And I'm just thinking like, you're not looking at this objectively, person who's saying this. Like, this music is good in its own right, but it's not just worse than modern music. Like, there are give and takes and all of this. So I think that's some people that kind of look through rose-tinted glasses to an extent.
Yeah, nostalgia is a powerful influence.
Absolutely.
But I think part of the reason people might say stuff like that is because a lot of older games, the music was more melodious.
That's
whereas
absolutely
a lot of music nowadays is more on the ambient side of things. So I think it just doesn't stand out as much to people.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think melody's coming back a lot because as games diversify, there are Shovel Knights, there are games that demand that sort of thing again. But I absolutely agree that like when you're just playing mainstream games and you remember playing Mario World and now you're playing Call of Duty, you kind of think, man, what happened to music? Games.
Yeah.
Brian, I need to interrupt you here.
Okay.
Joe and Christina, have you played Shovel Knight?
Yes.
We have, yes.
Do you like Shovel Knight?
I like Shovel Knight.
It's fantastic.
Really hard.
Just making sure.
Yeah. No, I can't play it for too long because I get kind of mad because it is really hard.
And you're a guy who plays retro games for like a living.
I'm actually...
Okay, you're right.
I'm kind of glad to hear you say that because I thought it was just me.
It's really, really hard.
And the thing is, it's not even like cheap difficulty. It's not like when they were designing, they're like, oh, we'll just make it hard because of that's how old games were. It's that smart difficulty that a lot of games have back then.
Mm-hmm.
That was Way Forward, right?
Yes.
What?
No.
No.
Yacht Club Games.
Kind of.
Oh, gosh.
Dudes from Way Forward broke off and made Yacht. Is it Yacht Games? Yacht Studios?
Yacht Club Games.
Oh, Yacht Club. There you go. So, yeah.
What has Way Forward come out with since that break-off? DuckTales? I'm trying to remember, because I get the two mixed up. Like, what's Way Forward coming out with these days?
Aren't they working on another Shantae?
We're working on 2 Shantae games.
Oh, they're working on 2 Shantae games.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. But yeah, that was just a little tangent I was curious about. But they typically have pretty great music, partially because they got Jake Kaufman so often.
Yeah.
Yes. Several hundred times, yes.
All right. So yeah, that is our views on nostalgia, which I think is pretty interesting. Question number 6. What's an underappreciated soundtrack from the Super Nintendo? And no Donkey Kong Country this time.
Oh, no. Donkey Kong Country 3?
Interesting fact about that one, I heard this on the Mercado Bros. David Wise was trying to port the soundtrack from Donkey Kong Country 3 to the Game Boy Advance. He did not make the original one on the Super Nintendo. And he found it so difficult to get the original composer's sound on the Game Boy Advance, he just created his own soundtrack for the Game Boy.
Oh, no kidding.
So there was a new David Wise soundtrack out with Donkey Kong Country 3 and the Game Boy Advance, which I had no idea about.
That's amazing. We need to buy both versions.
And the idea that he just...
That's the GBA one.
Yeah, I'd never realized that at all. Now I really want to check it out. But just the idea that he's so fast and good at composing music that he's like, I can't seem to port this. Oh, well, I'll just make a whole new soundtrack. That'll be easier.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's pretty ridiculous. So, Steven, you're not off the hook.
Oh, man. But this is embarrassing.
We all play mainstream games.
Yeah, I only play, like, the flagship SNES titles.
I don't have an answer. It's crazy.
We didn't own one until last year. Give me a break.
I have, like, 3 answers. I can give you a couple
Give
of
me
them.
all your answers.
Christina, we don't know.
So one of them that I was going to say is Evo: The Search for Eden, which is it's an Enix game, and it's the same composer as Dragon Quest. It's Koichi Sugiyama, and it's a really beautiful soundtrack because the whole point of the game is like you start out as a fish and you go through like the different ages and evolve. So it starts out with kind of like these creepy underwater tunes, and then it gets like upbeat when you're a little amphibian, and it just kind of carries on from there. It's worth checking out.
Sounds great.
I don't see many people talk about that game.
Is that
very
game
often.
Frog Fractions 2?
Is it what now?
Frog Fractions 2? Have you heard of it? Okay, Steven will get
No, sorry.
Okay. For people who know Frog Fractions 2, they will...
That was a hilarious joke.
Okay, so that sounds pretty neat. What were your other two?
The other one I was going to say is Illusion of Gaia, which is another Enix game. This one's a action RPG. I don't have a lot to say about that soundtrack, but it's really good.
It's an action RPG Super Nintendo soundtrack.
Yeah, it's got a lot of like epic, sweeping, loud tunes that have a lot of like oomph to them. Because it's primarily going through dungeons.
Right. Oomph is a very technical music term. So
oomph, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Half-meter oomp's my favorite.
Okay, I had 3. I forgot what the last... Oh, no. The last one I was going to say was The Twisted Tales of Spike McFang, which I actually just finished a replay of this week.
Wow, what is that? Is that like a platform about a dinosaur?
No, it's actually about a little vampire prince trying to save the kingdom from... I don't know, this evil demon guy. The translation's kind of bad. It's another action RPG. Is
that like Donkey Kong
cool
Jr. for Castlevania? Sounds like I said that sounds like the Donkey Kong Jr. premise for Castlevania.
Oh,
yeah. Now the vampire's going to save the day.
Yeah, kind of.
Huh.
It's top down. It's not a side scroller. It's a top down. Kind of, you throw your hat and use your cape to fight enemies off. Cool. It doesn't have a lot of music because it's a pretty short game. I ran through it in about 5 or 6 hours. But the tunes that are in it are really catchy.
Yeah, I really liked what I could hear when you were playing it.
Yeah.
That's right.
That sounds really... That reminds me of, what was that game? Kid Dracula or something?
Yes.
No idea. Death Jr.?
That was exactly what you're talking about, Brian, which is
really?
like the Donkey Kong Jr. version of Castlevania. It actually is that.
The cute little Castlevania game, yeah.
Really? Wow, I didn't know that actually existed. Huh.
Yeah.
That's neat.
I did a backlog episode.
Yeah,
yeah. See, I need to keep up with this show more. There you go.
Right. See, I'm cheating. I'm desperately trying to look through backlog episodes to say, that's my underrated soundtrack. That's a good one.
How many backlog episodes are there now?
Not counting special episodes, I'm working on 36 right now.
Gotcha. And this is like, what's the release rate for those? I
try to do every 2 weeks, but sometimes stuff happens. This one's going to be closer to 3.5, 4 maybe.
Well, it is 6 games, so it's more like you did it in 3/4 of a week or something. So good on you.
Yeah. This has been a big one, so I'm not going to beat myself up about it.
That's great. But, so I imagine you've come across a few obscure soundtracks.
Yeah, my underrated one, I actually did an episode on it. It's Tough Enough.
Tough Enough. Is that
Tough
like...
Enough. Tuff and then capital E.
Great.
Nuff.
So it's Chuck E. Head. Gotcha.
Yeah. One of my very first episodes is on that game. It's just it's a fighting game by Jalico. I'm trying to catch it on the Street Fighter 2 craze. And it's a decent fighting game, but the soundtrack, it's so good. It really has no business being in that game.
Sometimes I do that. I play a game and I'm like, wow, poor composer.
Yeah.
No, the soundtrack is great. It's a very ambitious soundtrack for a fighting game, I think.
How's that?
It just uses like a lot of different instruments, and the songs aren't all necessarily what you would think would go in a fighting game. Because they're not necessarily like, big booming instruments and trying to, increase the impact of the fighting. Right. It's just they're really good tunes that, they do get your blood pumping, but it's not necessarily using, I don't want to call them like cheap tricks, like, big booming instruments, but not necessarily like the same tropes that fighting game music typically relies on.
It makes sense. So that reminds me, my underappreciated soundtrack that no one's heard of, Street Fighter 2. There you go. You may have not tried this game.
I really like that guy with the French fries on his head.
Yes. Cool. All right. That's neat. Steven, I think we're just going to have to go with Christina's for this.
No, is this an underrated game? Is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers an underrated game?
I was thinking of that one.
That game has fabulous music. Fabulous music.
It sure does.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Like legitimately fist pumping awesome tracks on
the
that
Stewart
game.
one is like one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I don't know. We own a Power Rangers game for the SNES. I don't know.
Movie. Power Rangers.
The movie.
Yep.
I actually didn't play that one. Was that the fighting game?
There was a fighting game and a platformer based on the movie, I believe.
Oh, okay.
We got the platformer. What were you saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out if we have a good soundtrack.
We don't. We don't. I got you
man.
the wrong one. Yeah. Last birthday, that didn't go so well.
Yeah, bummer.
Didn't do my research. But no. Okay, I've got one. This one's going to surprise you all. Okay. Super Metroid. And question number 7.
Hey, let's throw a bone to the Lord of the Rings title.
There you go. There you go. Listen to the title screen song of Lord of the Rings. Don't play the game.
I'm gonna have to look this.
Yeah, we're gonna look that up as soon as this is over.
Go to YouTube. It's actually a good song. Just
no, I'm not joking. It's mature and medieval and quite beautiful. The game is just rubbish, but man, that soundtrack is good on the first track. But other than that,
oh, I forgot about Young Merlin. That's another really good one.
Ooh, that is a good one. Another backlog episode.
There you go.
Wow.
This episode is brought to you by The Backlog with Joe Walker.
Yeah.
Find a new old game to love.
Let's be on the show more often. This is great promotion.
There you go. Question number 7. How awesome is The Backlog?
Very awesome.
All right.
Okay.
Question number 7, part 2. How do you think game music has changed in the transition from the NES to the SNES?
Yeah, we were talking about this over dinner. We were actually going over all these questions while we were reading.
Awesome. Great. Perfect.
But I think that it was, I think a lot of composers were trying to make actual music and not just, here's some bleeps and bloops to go in the background.
Yep.
Hey, that was my technical term.
Well, yeah. Okay. Bleeps and bloops, copyright, Christina. But I think that it was more, since, the Super Nintendo could emulate actual instruments so well, I think that I think a lot of composers tried to make musical pieces that would stand on their own, that would not just, fit in the game world and, kind of help set the mood there, but to actually make music and not just, quote unquote video game music.
I agree.
Right.
It helped them grow past just having basically one melody, and let them, there were a lot more ambient tracks on the SNES. It was moving away from just always playing one catchy tune to where we are now. So I think it was one of the biggest steps in that direction.
Well, and Brian, you like that obscure soundtrack. You're a big fan of Super Metroid. That was the original Metroid tried to do this, but you can only do so much with 3 channels, one of which might get cut out for items or whatever the NES had. Like
go to a shop in Final Fantasy. And
exactly.
You're DJing that music while you shop.
And the fun thing about that is you can make your own remix.
Exactly.
Like certain items. But like Super Metroid, it created not just a melody, but an atmosphere. It was like almost half and half with that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like as the technology opened up, you could stop guessing quite so much as to what genre the composer was going for. Like, you can listen to Mega Man, that's some of the very best, most evocative music on the NES, but you're still kind of saying, I think he's trying to be like a rock band, I don't think it's orchestral, but on the SNES, especially with samples, they were able to get close enough to that, so you're like, yes, Plock is definitely blues, I understand this.
What gave it away, the harmonica?
Exactly. Like, you couldn't do a harmonica on an NES.
No.
Like, the original Legend of Zelda tried to do a flute, and you kind of got dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. It's like, all right, that's a flute. I'll buy that.
On that topic, wouldn't a harmonica that looks like an NES cartridge be awesome? Because it's like flowing on the connector.
That would be awesome.
That would be cool.
Brian, you should open up a new Etsy account.
I should make that, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'll get right on that. Sure, it'll be lucrative. But yeah, those are some great points. I think it was really a huge transition. Like, I don't think the N64 was nearly as big of a musical transition from the Super Nintendo as the Super Nintendo was from the NES.
No, definitely not.
No, it couldn't be because its competitors were both CD-based.
That was the big transition.
And, then they're still using cartridges and they just didn't have the room to make music that could grow the way the rest of the industry was.
Yep. That's always an interesting discussion is how much it hurt the Nintendo 64 going cartridge.
And I mean, there's some fantastic soundtracks on the Nintendo 64, but,
yes.
Those were people like Koji Kondo who really knew what they were doing.
Or Grant Kirkhope.
Or Grant Kirkhope, yeah.
Yes. One of those two. Or whoever the heck did...
Chameleon Twist.
That was probably Jake Kaufman under an alias.
Probably so. I wonder what would have happened to, say, Ocarina of Time if it had been on a CD.
Oh, man.
Like, I wonder if
it would have been the Wand of Gamelon or whatever, right?
It would not have. No, it would not have, Ryan.
Just saying.
I mean, do you think Koji Kondo would have, chosen different melodies or done, made longer, more complete songs? Like,
Twilight Princess wasn't horribly different.
But a lot of that was...
He's pretty much kept to the same sorts of things, I think, since...
That's a good point.
But, I mean, it is an interesting question, Stephen, if he's kind of kept to that because he's emulating Ocarina of Time at this point. I wonder if he had that huge jump in technology between the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation, if he'd think it's time to redefine what the music is. I mean, who can say? But he has kept consistent.
If only we had an Ocarina of Time and could find out for ourselves.
I don't know if that would help very much, but okay. Maybe we can get Koji Kondo on the show. But an Ocarina of Time would probably be more likely.
Yeah.
Let's move on here to question number 8. What have you been working on, a.k.a. plug your projects? Joe.
Well, I know Joe's been working on the backlog.
Dragon Ball Z, right?
Yeah, that's going to be the next one. I'm not sure when this episode is going to be coming out, but my episode is going to be up Monday at 4 p.m. on RetroWareTV.com. So Monday... Okay. I don't know what date that is.
This is coming up. This is going to come out on Saturday, so it's not going to be out yet.
Okay, good. So
August 4th, correct?
August 4th, yes.
All right, yeah. August 4th, 2014. There you go. Very rad, and sounds like you put a whole lot of effort into that one. So,
yeah, it's been a lot. So I'm kind of looking forward to putting a bow on it and getting it behind me.
I know the feeling, my friend. It's 6 Dragon Ball Z games. Like, is it from a specific console or from what's like your parameters for that?
Well, the first episode I did was just about the Super Butoden series on the Super Famicom, which was a trilogy of fighting games. And then everyone was like, oh, you should talk about more Dragon Ball. How come you didn't talk about this game? How come you didn't talk about this game? So I just got the rest of
Hey, Joe,
how
come you didn't talk about this game?
Well, because it wasn't part of the Super Butoden series. But,
all right.
So I got the rest of the 16 and 32-bit fighting games. So,
cool.
Mega Drive, Super Famicom, Saturn, PlayStation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So going up to like PlayStation, not Xbox, PS2. I don't know what. Did they go?
It's the last one I'm talking about chronologically is Final Bout, which was actually the first Dragon Ball game officially released in America.
Oh, okay.
And then it was also the last Dragon Ball game that was released until I think it was 2002 or 2003, until like the Budokai series started, and then we've had a new game every year.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of up until that few year lull where there was just nothing.
So are these hard to get your hands on, or are they pretty easy to import?
No, they're actually really easy to import. Like the Saturn and PlayStation games, you can import them now for like $10. So
nice.
Yeah,
are they good? Wait for the backlog.
Well, no, I mean I don't talk about bad games, so they are very good, and
cool.
You kind of need to be a fan to appreciate them today, I think, but they still hold up.
Neat. All right then, Steven or Christina, what have you been working on?
Well, I've been roped into helping with this episode for a start.
Nice.
So I'm gonna have some contributions that will be in that
Of the artistic nature.
Oh, man,
awesome.
I also, what else have I been up to? I'm still working. I still have my figure review show, Go Figure. It doesn't come out very often, but it is there. I have another one that's sort of almost done that I'm going to get back to work on after I'm done helping Joe with his massive undertaking.
You just need to get him to help you on that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Joe, hold this camera.
It's only fair.
But yeah, that's about it.
Cool.
Awesome.
Steven?
We very rarely add figures to our collection, just because we have enough hobbies to spend a lot of money on that, I guess.
It's an expensive hobby.
But the one I just can't wait to open is the one that comes with the collector's edition for World of Warcraft, Mists of Pandaria.
Oh, right, the Brewmaster.
It's giant chin storm stout Pandaren Brewmaster. It's just glorious, and we've been keeping it in its box until we play through that expansion.
It's pretty
cool.
neat. I
I'm so
recently
excited
picked
about
up a little plush doll, which is L from Death Note.
Oh, cute.
And he is amazing as a plushie, so
It is amazing.
Amazon just linked that to me and recommended stuff, and it's like, buy this. And I'm like, okay.
I will do as you say, Amazon.
Prime shipping? Okay, awesome. In 2 days. All right. But yeah, what have we been working on, Steven? Lots of stuff, correct?
Oh, yes. You've been working on the musical masterpiece that I got for my birthday, which we're going to put on the YouTube channel soon.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it's really been focused on Train Station at 8. It's kind of been our big project. We have some other ones still going
We got a
forward.
lot of Facebook page up, YouTube channel.
Oh, man, that's a really good point. Yeah, Train Station is now on Facebook and on YouTube.
Neat.
So far, YouTube is just the episodes, but hey, if you like listening to episodes there, that's good for you. And Facebook, I actually have some pretty interesting ideas for that if we can get it to work. But most of all, I'm hoping Facebook will be a place.
This idea is not a personality quiz, is it?
Nay,
Good.
it is not a personality quiz. Not yet. I'm hoping it's
Which
going to
host
be
are you more like? And we're almost exactly like each other, so good luck.
Well, the whole question will be, can you tell Steven and Brian apart? Yes, no.
Yeah. So what else? We got
So Facebook, Train Station, and I think that's kind of it. Then we have more projects kind of in the works, which might be coming out in the next month or so.
Recording a new podcast, but working on getting a backlog.
We sure have. Yeah, that's kind of been it. Go to whalesorwhales.com to find all that stuff and more.
Yeah, and you can find us now on Facebook at Train Station at 8. Just what would you search for that? I don't know Facebook, Steven.
It's Facebook/Train Station 8 probably, but
Google it. I'm sure it'll come up.
Hopefully.
We're Train Station at 8 on Twitter. Our website, we are on whalesorwhales.com/Train Station at 8, or you'll just see us there on the front page of whalesorwhales.com. If you want to email us, we're trainstation8@gmail.com. And personally on Twitter, I am Lord Meldor, and Steven is Stephen Kelly 180. Where can people find you on the internet, Joe and Christina?
I'm on Twitter at Space Kappa, and my YouTube channel is youtube.com/pkbloggin.
That's a great name.
Yeah, I used to do a gaming blog that kind of morphed into the show now, so the name still exists.
That's really rad. I like that name. What about you, Christina?
I am on Twitter at Lady Starstorm, all one word. And I am trying to remember what my YouTube URL is because I don't know it offhand.
Well, clearly we are here at Train Station are very prepared to give you
our URL. We're never
Facebook account.
Yeah.
Well, there's a link to hers on mine, so you just go to mine.
Grab Joe. I see how it is.
Then hers is right there on recommended channels.
Yeah, I think it's Lady Starstorm, but it might not work. I don't know.
Cool.
YouTube got confusing when they got taken over by Google.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't use YouTube too often yet, but we'll see about that. So thank you, both of you, for coming. That was great.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was always a good time.
Thank you, Stephen, for showing up yet again.
You're very, very welcome. I try to make a habit of it.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Train Station 8. Check out Whales Are Whales for this show and shows like this with people like us.
And I wanted to give one more little mention to iTunes for starters.
Right.
Go look us up there, subscribe, never miss an episode, and leave us a nice little review, and we'd be so super happy.
Absolutely.
And definitely check out Facebook. I was joking about it before. I don't understand Facebook. It's scary and possibly evil, but I really think we're going to have some cool stuff popping up over there. So please check it out. Maybe, I don't know, like it or whatever, and yeah.
You're
whatever you do on
expert.
Facebook.
Whatever you do on Facebook, we want you to be there, everyone listening.
I'm pulling it up on my phone right now. I'm going to like it right now.
Wow.
Yes.
See, be like Joe. Joe should be your example of a good human being. Speaking of Joe,
officially by the back.
On Whales Are Whales, be sure to check out our friends page. We have a lot of people up there by now. Mercado Bros, the backlog is up on there, and just other people that we think you should definitely check out, but who aren't a part of Whales Are Whales. And with that, thanks everyone. This has been Train Station 8, episode 20. And don't forget to say goodbye to the monkey porter. Hello, oh my voice.